Okay. So, hello to everybody. I'm going to get us started with a slightly more light-hearted approach to what is typically a very heavy subject. I'm Daniel Howden, one of the founders and directors at Lighthouse Reports, an investigative newsroom that's lucky enough to have worked with many people in the room here today. I'm going to be introducing you shortly to two of the earliest and best reporters on the subject of AI infrastructure and data centers, and also one of the most supportive organizations that helped to make their work and a lot of work like it happen. Before we jump into the present, I'd like to take you back to a more innocent time. This is 1993, and the first major cartoon that captured the feeling of the internet. You may have seen this before. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. Sweet, sweet times. And now I'm going to jump you forward into the present day with a couple more New Yorker cartoons that you may have been familiar with. One day, son, this farmland will be yours to sell to a tech company to build a data center. And my other favorite, which I think and hope may come to define this particular period of AI and the internet, is ChatGPT. Why is my electricity bill so high? Now, the great thing is, and I was tempted to do this, of course, you can now use AI to make your own New Yorker cartoon, which means that if you come back to here, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. This is the most valuable cartoon in cartoon history. It raised Peter Stein $250,000, and an original of this sold for $175,000. Thanks to AI, that will never be repeated. So what we're going to do today is leave behind a little bit the levity, but try to keep the sense that we're trying to define something that's truly enormous and unprecedented, which is a build-out of infrastructure. I mean, just in the last week, NVIDIA, who make the GPUs, the general processing units that power AI and latest generation data centers, announced a deal for $100 billion with OpenAI. The numbers involved are so huge that they're very, very hard to comprehend. The facilities and the sites that we're going to hear about today are extraordinary to approach and to contemplate trying to make sense of for an audience. The challenge for journalists so far has been, most of the time, it's individual journalists approaching gigantic facilities, trying to make sense of something which, for most of us, it has been kept as an abstract concept, the cloud. The cloud was such an incredibly effective piece of branding that most of us still conceive of our interaction with the internet as something that happens in an immaterial way. What we're going to hear in a very direct sense from some of the panelists today, and then invite questions from the floor as well, is how to approach something that is very, very much a ground level story, but is on a scale that's extremely hard to comprehend. And it's very difficult to imagine that there could be a more urgent task for journalists than grappling with this. Now, we're going to come first. Our first speaker is Laís Martin from The Intercept in Brazil, who has done some of the best reporting and has achieved some of the most profound impact with her work. But we'll come to Laís to tell us a little bit more about what she's working on. Over to you, Laís.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm really happy to be here. Can you pass on to the next slide? OK. So I'll start my short talk with this modern piece of artwork, which shows, so this is like a screenshot of a PDF of the response to a FOIA request, the Freedom of Information Act request I put in March of this year. You can see it says nothing, right? So basically what I asked here was for the process of a data center that wanted to start operating in Brazil. This is what we face when we try to get information. There's this complicity from governments, but also from companies and governments at the state level and federal levels to keep the information hidden. So this is why I think this type of journalism is so important, but also so challenging. And then, well, Daniel asked me to explain a bit why I got hooked into writing about data centers, and we were even discussing yesterday that I think Pablo shares this, right? Everyone who starts writing about data centers becomes obsessed. Like it's such a deep dive to learn about this type of stuff that it literally becomes an obsession. It's all I've done for the past 6-8 months. But I think I started from a point where I'm a very concerned person about the state of the world, as we all should be, you know, climate change, the climate crisis, the democratic crisis. And I think data centers are a story that lie at the perfect intersection of these two crises. It's not a story only about infrastructure, it's a story about energy, as we'll see. It's a story about power, it's a story about greed. So I think, why not? And the moment I started digging into this was exactly the moment that the Brazilian government began speaking about a plan to attract investments in data centers. And mind you, like, this is a very important difference, right? It's not a plan on data centers or a national data center policy, it's a policy to attract investment in data centers. And two things of this discourse from the government, a left-wing government in Brazil, immediately caught my attention. There was talk of tax breaks and economic incentives to make Brazil more appealing to these big tech companies who are the ones who can take up this market, but also this window of opportunity. And this has been said over and over again. Because Brazil has something that is probably the key element in this AI arms race at the moment, which is energy, clean energy. So very good for big tech companies to go to Brazil and clean their reputation instead of using gas or coal or other fossil fuels to use clean energy. The problem is these projects are coming for areas where people live, right? And not only people. Indigenous communities, traditional peoples from Brazil, like quilombolas, because there's an intersection between the areas where these energy projects are installed, the areas where we have availability of land, and indigenous lands. So one of my big stories, and like this is a story I've been following, and this is also why I think we've been able to achieve impact, and I'm looking at Joanna because this story was supported by the Pulitzer Center, is the story of a TikTok data center coming for the northeast of Brazil, where the plot of land lies inside an indigenous land, a land that is claimed by an indigenous group called the Anacé as their homeland. They were never consulted about the project. They only learned about it because of a story I wrote for The Intercept in April. And in the past few months, it has been an amazing process, although very conflictive also, of learning together what a data center is, what it means for these communities, the water use, the energy use, if they will benefit from it, if it's going to generate jobs. And the process is now coming to its apex, I would say, because the indigenous are taking TikTok to court to stop this project because they've decided they don't want it. And this is the first pushback against data centers in Brazil, and a very symbolic one, because the country is on the verge of becoming a data center hub because of energy, because of the incentives, and all these things. Do I have time? Yeah? I didn't catch the moment. And then I think, like, you know, part of the point of us being here is getting more people to report on the, oh, my slides, I forgot about this. I'll speak about this. There's an extra challenge in Brazil, which is, you know, when I started covering data centers, I read Pablo's stories so much, they inspired me so much, like his work is very much a reference to me. But Brazil is a bit earlier in this calendar of data center implementation because we don't have them yet. So there's this extra challenge for reporting where I'm speaking to people about something that is very unknown to them, but even more, it doesn't exist yet. So this is the area where it's in the south of Brazil, in the city that was most flooded during massive floodings we had last year. And this is like the only image I'm able to give my audience of what the data center will look like. This area on the left, you can see the trucks coming out. They were taking wood that had been cut down from this area, and everything that is now clear will host this massive data center, an AI city. So there's this challenge of speaking to people and getting them to care about something that is not visible. Because once data centers exist, they're very shocking, right? There are these huge, horrible infrastructure boxes that looks like an alien dropped it there. But if they're not there yet, how do you get people to engage? And I think then moving on to the final part of my little talk, what does it take to do this type of reporting, right? And as I was saying, I think what we want here is that people in other countries also get engaged and also understand the importance of covering this crisis right now, because things are moving super fast. Like, there's a window of opportunity also for us journalists. And I would highlight 3 things. I think perseverance, very important, because you're gonna get FOIA requests like these ones that are terrible. Stubbornness, also because you're gonna get FOIA requests like this, but people are gonna shut you down on the phone. They don't want to talk to you. Maybe you don't see or you cannot access the areas where data centers will be built. And creativity. Also because you're talking about stuff that doesn't yet exist, but you're talking to people about something that is unknown to them, right? So like the indigenous in Brazil, they had no idea what a data center was. And it's not because like they're indigenous in this remote area. Many people maybe here don't know what a data center actually does, right? So I think this also entails some humility from us reporters in taking a step back and explaining to people exactly what they need, like what is the information needed for them to take action at this moment. And the main thing I would say is necessary is engagement. And yesterday, I heard the Lighthouse Reports people saying, using this word coalition, and I love that because as reporters, journalists in general, we think we work alone. But because of these crises and because we don't have any more time we cannot afford to be dishonest with our audiences and the people we're working with about our intentions. It requires working in coalition, right? So getting civil society groups, getting activists, getting communities on the front lines of these projects together with us from the start. Not as sources only, not as people we want to consult at the end of the project, but embedded inside the project. And I think that's why we've been able to achieve so much impact with this story and getting the indigenous to go to court against TikTok now. I just want to share this very quickly because my time is also up. When I speak of creativity, this was one of the resources we used to tell people how big this data center is. So we got information on the energy use of this project. And we made this calculation that if the TikTok data center were a Brazilian city, it would be the 7th city that most consumes energy in the country. In a country of continental proportions, mind you, right? So more than 3 states, and this was very shocking. I think the local population in this town really understood the scale of the project when they saw this number. Next, just so I show. Slide. And this is the area where the TikTok data center will be built. So really like terraforming the planet. Imagine in the second picture, a data center, like plopped down. And this is how far you can get to this area. Like you cannot access it. So even if the data center were already there, I couldn't go and look at it. So there's also the challenge of, like lack of visibility to speak about something that you're not even seeing. That last one. And this is the series. It's in Portuguese. There are some stories in English on the Pulitzer Center website. I invite you to read. And yeah, the QR codes are on the next screen. Thank you so much. I think that's it for now.
Thank you, Laís. I think it's getting on for nearly 3, possibly 4 years ago. I first came across the work of Pablo. As Lighthouse, we were trying to approach the whole world of algorithms and early AI, and really struggling to find human stories that would help to connect to the work that we wanted to do around algorithmic accountability reporting and other horrific, chewy phrases like that. And we found Pablo. And Pablo was already working with some of the most committed people in this field to try and bridge the gap between technology and human stories. Pablo has done an incredible amount of work, and I think most impressive is that he's done this as a freelance. So, Pablo, if you could tell us how you've managed to get some of the biggest publications in Europe to run some of the biggest stories that they've run on some of the largest data centers. That's a lot of bigs. But yeah, I look forward, and there's a lot to learn from your experience in this. So over to you, Pablo.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, on your question on how to get the big outlets interested in this kind of stories, and as a freelance, convince them to get them published. Yeah, I think probably we would need like a new a whole session for this. But yeah, and of course it's challenging, but I think that also reporters that work as me as freelancers, that's part of our job, right? To pitch and to convince the editors that the stories that we bring to them are relevant. And I really think this is a very relevant story. I think that Daniel and Laís have gone through it already. So yeah, just also to give you a very brief summary on how I got to this story. Pretty similar to what happened to Laís. I mean, I've been working on this for 2 years now, almost 2 years. So at the beginning was as simple as I started to read news of US big tech companies arriving to my country, to Spain, to build these massive infrastructures. I think that it's very important to understand that I mean, data centers have existed since the 90s, to say so. But what we are talking about here is something completely different. I mean, since November 2022, release of ChatGPT and like the founding moment of the generative AI boom and hype, like this industry has changed completely, right? So these new generation data centers from big tech are called hyperscalers. This is like a kind of a technical word that is used in the industry, but just to give you a very short idea, is they are designed and think to scale, right? To always grow based on the needs of the companies that run them, right? So yeah, and these infrastructures are designed to underpin the largest generative AI models that we all know today, right? Including ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, and so on, right? So the point with these infrastructures is that they need unprecedented computing capacities, and that means an unprecedented size and an unprecedented use of basic resources. First, energy, Laís mentioned it. These buildings, like the numbers are completely insane. And they need water, because they need water to cool down the servers that are running 24/7, right? So yeah, a bit like connected with Laís already mentioned, I think that this story, it touches, two of the biggest stories of our times, right? Like climate catastrophe and AI developments, right? So that's a bit how I started. And yeah, in the last 10 months, I've been working through a fellowship with the Pulitzer Center. I had already, I mean, before starting this fellowship, I had been doing already some work in Spain. But basically, my idea was, okay, so this is a global phenomenon, so let's be ambitious and let's start looking not only in Spain, but also in other countries, right? So basically what I've done in the last 10 months was investigating the local impacts of more than a dozen hyperscale data centers in different stages of development. That's a bit what Laís was saying. I mean, in Brazil, like this challenge of reporting on things that are not built yet. In my case, I've looked both to data centers that are planned, but also some others that are already built, from three companies, like AI giants, to say so, right? Or AI infrastructure giants, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, and Google. And in three different locations: Spain, in a region called Aragon, which has become, like in 2-3 years, like a huge hub for this infrastructure; Querétaro in Mexico; and Santiago, de Chile, the capital of Chile. So yeah, these are regions that are separated by thousands of kilometers, but they have one common thread that is basically, yeah, they've become top destination for this industry, and specifically for the companies that I've mentioned, right? So yeah, in this this is there's like a short summary of the project in the Pulitzer site, and yeah, I've published like multiple studies in the last few months, and basically trying to explain what we found during these 10 months, which is, I'm gonna summarize it very, very quickly. Yeah, companies extracting basic resources such as water in areas which are already facing severe droughts, companies using fossil fuel energy sources that were not there before, only to power these data centers. And all this is happening under a bill of secrecy that sometimes include like the use of shell companies that makes extremely difficult for journalists, but also for local communities to investigate and to know actually what is happening and what is behind, right? So in this slide, yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat like things that Laís already said, because she has done an amazing job on community reporting in Brazil, and in my case, yeah, I've let's say combined like different methods, different skills, but one of them, of course, has been also community reporting, and for this, I think that Chile is a very unique case. Probably, yeah, I would say that it's a unique case worldwide. I mean, in the last few years, multiple grassroots movements in the country have actively opposed or oversee the development of these projects with multiple consequences. I mean, one of the most emblematic cases is the one that happened in a comuna called Cerrillos, which is in these pictures. I'm in a meeting with people from this comuna, which in Chilean Spanish is, yeah, the district. This is in the, keep in mind that this is something that I've seen in the 3 countries that I've been working on. But in Chile, I think that you can see it very easily. I mean, companies arrive to places, poor areas, working class, people living there. And when I was in Chile, I got really amazed on how these people were able to organize themselves and to challenge a huge monster like Google. And the great thing that happened in Cerrillos, that I think that is, yeah, I think that, yeah, Netflix could do a great show. Hopefully not Netflix, but yeah. Yeah, they defeat Google. I mean, basically the company had to stop the project. I mean, they arrived to Cerrillos with the worst project that they could have designed. I mean, using an insane amount of water in a place where they are facing severe droughts. So yeah, I think that, well, this is a good example of why grassroots movements and community organization sometimes works, right? So I think I'm running out of time, but yeah, next slide. Yeah, just to. We're going to save this next one for the next one. Yeah, it was the one with this friend of us, this one, yeah. So just a remark that I think that to give an idea of the way of thinking of the AI giants, right? Probably people here that have covered the tech beat know this guy, he's Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google and the world's 45th richest person. And this is a frame from an intervention of him in a AI and energy summit. You will see multiple summits like these ones, like in coming years. And I think that at a certain point, he's very comfortable, so he is brutally honest with the audience. He says that energy demand for AI business is infinite. And then he keeps talking, and at the end he says this sentence that I think that summarizes quite well. In these intersections that we were talking about, yeah, climate catastrophe and AI hype and boom, he says, we are not going to hit the climate goals anyway. The needs in this area, in the AI area, will be a problem. But I would rather bet on AI solving the problem than constraining it and having the problem, right? This is like a bit of a tricky sentence, but I think that it really summarizes the way of thinking of these people, right?
Thanks so much, Pablo. So we're talking about stories about indigenous rights, stories about land rights, stories about drought and climate change. We're talking about a business story, and we're also talking about some of the wealthiest and most powerful people, and by far the richest companies in the world, the narratives that they're pushing, and a kind of recklessness matched with extraordinary capital. So probably it's something that journalists should really quite get into. But trying to understand what it takes for journalists to grasp this story and feel equipped to take it on is something that Joanna, who's joining us from the Pulitzer Center, who's the AI editor, Joanna helped to put together a survey which is meant to help us kind of get a baseline understanding of how journalists are feeling and where they see their needs around this. It would be great, Joanna, if you could tell us a little bit about what you found and also introduce to those who are not familiar what Pulitzer's been doing to support people like Pablo and like Laís.
Sure. First I was going to just say that I feel incredibly humbled to be on this panel with Laís and Pablo because they're really such incredible journalists who do really great human-centered work and really make those stories really hit with the public and the people, the communities who are really being affected by data centers. So it's incredible to be in this panel with them. As Daniel said, I oversee the AI Accountability Network at the Pulitzer Center, which is a nonprofit based in DC, but we support journalists all around the world, work on investigations on a number of different topics. So AI is the area that I oversee, and a lot of things that we talk about at the Pulitzer Center around AI is really around field building. Partially because a lot of the reporting that you see around AI still is around product releases or quotes from executives who are within the industry, but we still don't see a lot of stories that are really thinking about what goes into making AI happen. So part of that is like the human labor behind it, looking into what the models are made out of, who's involved in creating these. And a big part of it is this data center part, like what is the infrastructure that goes into supporting all of what AI needs to actually function. And so when we think about this field building, part of what we need to do is think about what do journalists actually need. We need more Laíses and Pablos, and it's great to have them as models here because they are very much the kind of journalists that we look for, people who are really interested in collaboration and sharing with people. And we were just talking right before coming up here about some tips that they were just sharing with each other right before. And I know both of them would love to see more people work on this. Jiménez. So early in this year, so Daniel at Lighthouse and Justin at Tech Policy Press and us at Pulitzer Center, we got together to think about how we could really use our strengths together and really continue to build this field, particularly around data centers. And at the Pulitzer Center, we already have a couple of programs that we had started, but nothing specifically about data centers. So we really want to know what people were thinking. So within our 3 networks, we reached out to lots of people and got 279 respondents, which we were pretty happy with. And as you can see from the map, we were able to get people to respond from all over the world. When we first sent this out, we weren't quite sure what we were going to get. Do people even know what data centers are? Are they interested? Is it happening in their country? And actually, when we came back and we looked at the data, we were like, wow, this is actually really, truly a global story. Companies are going into more and more countries, and more people are interested and should be interested, not just on the national or international levels, but also on the regional and the local levels. If you want to go to the next slide. One of the things that we wanted to ask people was, what are the stories you're already seeing in the news today? And this is what they saw. A lot of people were talking about, we see lots of new announcements about data centers coming or new buildings being put up. And most of the focus is on that economic development investment, what is it going to help to revitalize my city? That's often the kinds of stories that people are already seeing now. At the point we did the survey, we were starting to see a couple of more stories looking out, how does this affect electricity consumption? How is it going to affect prices for me? We were starting to see a couple more stories on water scarcity. But there's so many more angles that need to be covered, and some of them probably could be covered more. And we're starting to see more stories around noise pollution or air pollution or land rights. But still, the predominant angle that people were reading about was really that economic development investment, and often without much of actual independent confirmation on what those numbers would really mean. Next one. We asked people how ready they felt to report on data centers already. One of the things that's really great about this, being able to support AI stories, is that AI is really an intersection. You can really have intersections of AI in lots of different topics. We see that, if you're reporting on data centers, you could be someone who's reporting on real estate. You could be reporting on the environmental impact. You could be looking at water. You could be looking at electricity. There's so many angles you could be looking at. So we want to get a sense of where people felt at the moment. And most people, there were a couple of people who had started to already produce a bunch of data center stories. Some of them were people that we'd support at the Pulitzer Center, but the large majority were people who said, I feel somewhat comfortable, or I don't even know where to start. So what we asked people was what challenges they have experienced or what challenges they think they might see. And this is what they said. A big part of it is the difficulty of accessing information. Part of it is knowing what information to get, and that's also what Laís and Pablo have been talking about already. But also being able to actually access it even if you know it exists is also sometimes difficult. The other thing is also understanding what they see as a technical aspect of data centers. I think this is not necessarily just for data centers, but probably for AI in general, is that it's really, companies are kind of incentivized to make data centers and AI sound really complicated. Because if you make it sound really complicated, you can charge people more for that, and people can't question you when you say things. And they've done the same thing with data centers. So a lot of people look at what seems like these massive buildings, and they don't know what goes into them. So that feels like a difficult challenge to overcome. The third, I think, is that just a lack of time. If you go back to the other one, it's just a lack of time. I think this is something that lots of people talked about in sessions prior to this, but a lot of organizations are strapped for time and resources, and so a lot of them just need the time to actually go for looking for information or look for technical aspects. And I think the last thing I'll just highlight here is also there's just this idea that data center reporting is not interesting, that the audience won't be interested in it. And what I really love about what Laís and Pablo did in both of their stories is they really engaged the community from the very beginning. I remember Laís once was telling us that she would go and interview people, and they would ask her, what is a data center, and how should I feel about it? And because a lot of communities, they might not seem interested, but that's because they don't know how it affects them yet. And so I think there's also just a lot of basic reporting that needs to happen so that communities understand that when these companies come into their community, it's not just something that's going to sit in a corner that won't have any effect on them, but actually will have real, tangible effects on their daily lives. So the last thing that we asked them was what kind of support would be helpful. That last thing is the main thing that they wanted to get from us is training. So training on how to find information to begin with, training on the basics of data centers so it feels less intimidating, less like technical jargon, and financial support to pursue in-depth projects. And then also they also want to connect with other journalists regarding reporting on data centers. What's kind of cool to see about with these answers is actually this is kind of the support that we've been focusing on already. So it's been good to see in some way to confirm that what we've been doing has been what people actually do need. We started a training series called the AI Spotlight Series, which is a free training for journalists to report on AI. And what we learned from our first year of doing it was that just giving people a framework and common terminology really made it easier for people to collaborate with each other because they were using the same words. And it also just made people feel a lot less scared to go talk to their sources about these topics because they felt like they at least had some of the same words and could understand what was happening. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks, Joanna. That's really helpful. I'm going to come back to the panel with a couple of shorter questions and answers. And there's a couple of things I'd like to address, but then I'm going to invite questions from the audience as well. Now, Laís, you said that communities aren't quite sure what they're getting when a data center comes into their community. The same thing goes to a great extent for the political class around the world. It may not seem obvious, but in many instances, it's actually not just in Brazil, but elsewhere, it's a left-wing government that's opening its doors to massive AI infrastructure investments. There's a lot of political rhetoric that directly ties the idea of AI infrastructure to economic growth. You've had some conversations and feedback that there have been people in government who want to talk to you about your reporting because it's been impactful. Could you give us a sense of quite how little is understood or how small the sense of control or sovereignty is when it's these huge companies coming to governments around the world, even governments of countries on the size and scale of Brazil?
Yeah, I think that's a very hard question to answer, but a very good one, and one that is very difficult to include in reporting because I think people don't really care or not interested in data sovereignty, and that's really challenging to write about. But yeah, I mean, all the governments Pablo has covered are left-wing governments. Brazil is, and we have other countries elsewhere in the world who are also opening their doors. So it's not, I think my big question, something I've been trying to answer is how have people become convinced that data centers are a good idea, right? And this is what we try to answer with our reporting. And a lot of that involves debunking jobs information, right? Economic development stories. But then also I think there's just this confusion. So for example, this government official called me last week, talk about the national data center policy that was published, and he gave me a very good quote that I'm going to use in a story, so don't steal it. But he said basically, data center development is an ungoverned train that is coming towards us at high speed, and we need to take advantage of it. And I'm like, how do you take advantage of an ungoverned train? You cannot even hop on it, right? Because it's ungoverned and high speed. And I think it really shows how they're looking at something that is terrible with a very rosy lens, trying to take advantage out of it. And then the confusion is, he told me, we need to bring data back to Brazil, because right now it's all in big tech hands, and with the Trump thing, we're super concerned about it, and I get that. But the thing is, the companies who are ready to take over the data centers that Brazil wants to build are big tech companies. So it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's Amazon Web Services processing our data regardless in the US or in Brazil. So then you're not getting anywhere closer to data sovereignty or developing your own tech sector. So I think our reporting, although it's kind of boring and technical, we need to be telling people this, we could dream of something bigger. There's this Chilean researcher, Paz Peña Ochoa. She told me something that really stuck with me. And she said, our countries should dream of a bigger role in the AI race than being backyards. Because this is what we're doing right now. We're giving up our resources like water, energy, land, without getting anything back. I don't want to be a backyard. Like, I want Brazil to be a protagonist in the AI race. Develop your own systems, models, something, right? So it's also about a lack of creativity from these governments, although they're left-wing governments. So it's a bit disappointing in some ways.
Thanks, Laís. It's easy to think that someone somewhere has a plan and that they know where all of this is going. So I think it's really helpful sometimes to hear that actually, even for the people who are supposed to be running countries, this is just a runaway train that's coming at them. And that runaway train is driven by people who are incredibly reckless. And there is a giant bubble being built up, which brings me to my next question for you, Pablo. And I'm going to inelegantly click back through some slides here. If I could just have the slides back for a second. While those are coming up, one of the things that you consistently get asked is, what is a clean data center? What is a dirty data center? And that's a very hard question to answer. And it's not a hard question to answer by accident. It's a hard question to answer by design. Eric Schmidt and his fellow travelers are making it incredibly hard to answer those questions. And many of our institutions are collaborating in this wall of non-disclosure. Pablo, you've been banging your head on that wall in the case of the European Commission. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. It's a pleasure to talk about this. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's actually the one that Laís shared first. I think that is a good, a good match. So, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been doing in the last couple of years is, besides community reporting, going through thousands of pages of technical documentation about data centers, is FOIAing freedom of information requests to all the administration levels that I thought that could give me something. So yeah, I did this in Spain at the local level. Yeah, you have to be creative also when you FOIA, because just to give you a snapshot, I mean, for instance, I got some data from a local municipality in Spain because I was not asking for the data usage, the water usage of a specific data center, but I was asking for the usage of a whole industrial park. So, I mean, there are always loopholes that you can try to use, but for that you need actually to get really embedded into how, I mean, what is the regulation, how transparency laws work. So in every context. So that's really time-demanding work, but I think that is part of our job as investigative reporters. So yeah, besides local administrations, I also asked both the Spanish government and the European Commission on some specific data, which is actually mentioned in the new regulation that the European Commission has drafted and has approved already, that includes certain metrics on basically on the sustainability of data centers. Among them are the use of water, the use of energy, and some other numbers. So basically, I went through this new law that has been already approved also in the European Parliament, and I FOIA the European Commission asking for this specific data that themselves they recognize. They say that this is important data that has to be, this is an important point. This is data that has to be communicated by operators from data centers in the EU to the member states, and the member states then send this data to to the European Commission that is planning to do a database, blah, blah. So I FOIA the Commission asking for the data of 3 individual data centers from Amazon Web Services in Spain. And yeah, I asked for these numbers, and the reply was that this was confidential information that could affect commercial interests of the companies. So I appealed this decision, saying that, well, that I thought that the need of higher transparency in this growing industry, blah, blah. Well, I don't know whatever I wrote, but it took me a while to figure out exactly how to give the right arguments, right? So yeah, I appeal, and these screenshots that you see in the screen is the final reply from the European Commission, right? So here you can see how basically they come back to this idea that the requested information constitutes confidential information that could affect the commercial interests of companies, right? So yeah, I think that this is something, this is a huge challenge. We have to keep in mind that this law that I use to request this information is pretty new. I mean, this is an industry that is moving, as this public official told Laís, as an ungoverned train coming very fast to us. I mean, in Europe also, legislation is coming late, but there is something. But still, I mean, for journalists, civil society, if the tools that they are creating are not actually useful for those that try to oversee this industry, not being part of the industry, I think that is a useless law effort, right? So yeah, that's a bit what shows this slide. And yeah, one thing that maybe you, Daniel, can complement this idea, but I think that probably thinking on what's next, right, from reporters. I mean, one of the things that I think that we actually need to start doing is try to legally challenge this kind of opacity. But of course, yeah, that's a lot of work, and that's not easy. But I think that that's a crucial part of the work that has to be done, not only in Europe but in other regions too.
Thanks, thanks, Pablo. It's really hard to talk. It's sometimes hard to bring into focus in a compelling way the importance of access to information. But I'm just, to give people a sense of what's at stake here, there is no emission standard. There's no benchmark for what makes for a clean data center or a dirty data center. This is the AI infrastructure that's being built out at an unprecedented rate. Laís used the term terraforming the planet. By far the largest and fastest infrastructure build-out that we've ever seen, and there are no guardrails, there's no standards set, and the first effort to build a database which could be used to give a rating or a ranking to this, and therefore an incentive to these companies, we're not going to be allowed to know what the companies are reporting to the European Commission because it might impact the commercial interests of those companies. So there are battles to be fought everywhere. I mean, it's a crazy idea. Just before we move to questions, so we have, as I said, indigenous rights. If you're an energy reporter, if you are a business reporter, if you're an environment reporter, if your work is on human rights, if your work is on technology, this story is coming to communities where you are, it's coming to countries where you are. Up on the panel here, we have people who can help you find resources, people who can listen to your ideas. people who may well want to work with you as well. We haven't even managed to get to the point of discussing what's happening with clean energy fantasies around this. But I want to leave 10 minutes now for questions from the audience. I see some hands going up. I'm just going to look around. There is the lady at the back there who's lucky to be next to the mic with the headband.
Thank you.
If you could please identify yourself and then put your question to the panel. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anna. I am a student of journalism. I'm currently in my thesis. And my question is, to Ms. I didn't catch your name in the beginning. Yes. When you talked about indigenous rights, my first thought was about colonialism. Do you compare what's happening now with data centers to what happened with colonialism? And would you use that for storytelling in your work?
I'm just going to take a couple more questions from the audience. Lady in the green cardigan. If I could see some more hands, and then we can direct people around.
Thank you. I'm Marie Duzimov from the Columbia University Paris Global Center, and I have a question about, for the reporters. Has your reporting on the impact of data centers informed your own perception of the journalism industry's ethical, responsible use of AI?
That's a big question. I've got a gentleman over here with the green shirt. And then we'll move to answers.
This is a question for Pablo, just following up on this very interesting correspondence.
Yason, if you could identify yourself.
I'm Yason Athanasiadis, a freelance journalist. So this very interesting correspondence you had with the European Commission. Do you believe that this reply is conditioned by the lawsuits that multinationals have brought against the European Union on lost profits over the last decade? And did you have a chance to follow up with them and ask them, what about this whole tradition of transparency that the EU is supposedly built upon? Doesn't this come into conflict with it? And furthermore, has there been any legal action, to your knowledge, relating to this non-transparency and the interests of multinationals?
Thank you. We'll take more questions because I'm going to ask the panel to keep these answers quite short. Now, the first question I'm really grateful for because it was absent a little bit, and it's a huge factor here. But Laís, could you speak to, we've seen stories like this before. The question was specifically about whether or not this is basically a form of colonialism that we're seeing. What are your thoughts?
Yes. Basically, I think that's a short answer, but it's a comparison I didn't have to make, the communities made, right? Like, they are seeing extractive industries come to their land over and over again. The difference is now the extraction is kind of invisible. But this is a comparison that has been made in reporting, like Karen Howe mentions this in her book, how it's a new form of extractivism and colonialism. And I think being honest with our audiences that this is indeed a new form is necessary. So it has appeared in some of my stories. And just like a minor fact, I read this morning a paper that's actually from 2024 that shows how the undersea cables that connect the world, like the internet, actually reproduce slave routes, right? Like the routes that the ships took. So it's a very interesting comparison, and this is actually, well, now it's going the other way. Instead of coming, it's going out. But I think we have to use these analogies because people know what we're talking about, right? So, yeah.
Pablo or Laís, either of you to speak to, the question was whether or not doing this reporting changes your own perception of using AI. Pablo, are you going to tell us now that you wrote your stories using ChatGPT?
Yeah, that was the plan, yeah. Yeah, being completely honest, I mean, I don't, yeah, I don't actively use AI tools on my work. Yeah, this is due to several reasons, but yeah, trying to answer your question, I think that, yeah, not only journalists and media organizations, but like everyone has to be conscious about the tools that we use and the impacts that they have. But also something that is, I think, that pretty important, and we haven't mentioned it yet. I mean, this is not the only possible AI. I mean, this is the AI that huge tech corporations are deciding that will be. So we very easily like talk about AI in general terms. I mean, we are. I think that these impacts reflect what are the human decisions taken by just a very small elite of people living in Silicon Valley and around. So yeah, also thinking on journalists and media organizations, I think that there are alternatives. And yeah, there are ways to use more responsibly and more consciously this technology.
I'll address Yasun's question quite quickly. There are potential legal challenges to that rejection. The motives for that rejection, we're left a little bit to speculate. I think the most telling thing was that in answering to Pablo, they basically said, you've asked for information we haven't yet collected from these data center operators, but if we had collected it, we still wouldn't tell you. So it's being treated as a commercial secret, and that definitely needs to be challenged. More questions from the group. Gentleman down here on the right, and then the lady in the blue card and the blue top.
My name is Yannis Muratidis. I work for a printed paper called Anexarchity here in Greece. Now I am on a research about data centers too in Greece, actually globally, but I will publish this research in Greece. And I look for two different aspects from the aspects you have already presented here. If you have any researches that connected data centers with the defense strategy of a country, and also connected with the nuclear industry and small nuclear reactors.
SMRs. And the lady in the blue top. And just any more show of hands for one last question. Sorry, the gentleman there, the gentleman in the dark top. I can't see whether it's black or blue, sorry.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mary Kariotaki, and I'm coming from Creta. So I want to ask if those helpful answers that you took became helpful tools for us, because we just have one data center in Heraklion, and we have to start from somewhere. Are accessible those tools?
Okay. And the gentleman just a couple of rows back behind the guy in the red shirt. Yeah, just here. Thank you.
Hi, Zach Toombs with Evident Media. Great talk, and thank you for the information on the FOIA challenges. What about the on-the-ground access or lack thereof? I mean, I'd love to hear more about what you learned from on-the-ground reporting around the data centers, and what possibilities you see for any kind of creative on-the-ground access just physically around data centers in various countries.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to actually start in a kind of semi-reverse order. Joanna, could I ask you to speak to the lady asking the question, should there's one data center in Crete, what kind of resources exist from reporting so far?
Yeah, so we did the survey back in May. So I think part of it, I'm going to say, be a little bit patient because we're still working on some of the resources. But immediately what you can already do is whenever we support any journalists with stories, we ask them to write a methodology. So we basically are creating a larger and larger resource so that people can read about how the reporting was done. So Laís, I think she had a QR code, I think, with her methodology on the Pulitzer Center website. Pablo's actually just went up yesterday evening, so you can also see his as well. So if you're looking at at how to get started, you could look at how they both got started, some of the tactics and ways they got around the loopholes, some of the things that they saw when they were on the ground reporting with communities, what they did to reach out to communities. Like all of those tactics are already in the write-ups that they put onto our website. So that's like maybe one place to start. But also as a result of that survey, we are working on extending our current training program to add a module on data centers in particular, so that we can really create a foundational understanding of how to report on data centers, what are some of the common terminologies that you can use, so that when you're working with other people, hopefully in a collaboration, if you want to work with others, you can have that same vocabulary to work with together. We're also working with Lighthouse Reports and Tech Policy Press to also do some more community building around data centers and hopefully some more investigations to learn from. So I would say start with those things, but also we're really trying to get people to work on these things together. We've been doing some community building. I know Laís and Pablo would love to be working with more people. So if this is something you're interested in or have other thoughts on how you can tackle it from your own areas, like please come chat with us. We're definitely trying to build this out.
We're out of time, but we will be at the side of the stage. We're very happy to field any more questions you might have, just as a kind of inside the panel explanation. When you have run out of time and everything has come to an end, what we were putting up to show the speakers is this. It says Sam Altman. So there we go. Thanks to my panelists, Laís, thanks Joanna, thanks Pablo, and thanks to everyone for your questions.